Hey there, and welcome to the ADK Rock and Metal channel. I, of course, am Dave. There is no Kirk or Andy with me today as they are off doing other projects for the channel. But joining me today is John Gallagher from the wonderful, wonderful Raven. Hi, John. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dave. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Great to have you on. It's a classic, a legend, as you might say. Um, New wave of British heavy metal, some people say, but I never really heard you guys as new wave of British heavy metal. To me, you were almost, I always almost had you in the thrash element in my personal head,
Well,
British thrash band.
I mean, there's a lot of people that try to say, new wave of British heavy metal. It means they play this riff, and no, it was just an era. It was a time.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of bands that started, a bunch of kids really that just started playing music because they liked it, and they were kind of fed up with punk, and all of a sudden, boom, the world turned around and went, oh, what's going on here? And decided to baptize it. And, the way people go on now, it's as if you're a card carrying member or something. It's just like, hey up, lad, you got your membership card.
That's it. You got to flash that.
That's why all the bands, the initial bands, were all so different. The only thing they had in common was passion and energy, and the only thing I think that came out of punk was that whole do-it-yourself type of ethos that came out of it a lot. It's just like, well, if they can do it, we can do it.
Yeah.
And that went all down the line. It was, we'd be playing our working men's club gigs and saw a thing in Sounds with the Tigers of Pantang. It's like, hang on a minute. They're just up the road. What happened here? And then the next week, their manager was at one of our gigs saying, you guys want to do a single for Neat Records? And, the world changed in about 5 minutes,
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's what's crazy for me was when I came across Raven on Life's a Bitch album.
Uh-huh.
So back that would have been in the 90s. I was going through this transition stage of being a fan of just bands like Def Leppard, Thunder, and starting to get into more thrash metal. So I was getting introduced to sort of the Metallicas, the Megadeths, and before all these standard, before streaming platforms, etc., I went into the CD exchange, cassette exchange shops, and went to the metal catalogs, and I was flicking through, and I came across Raven's Life's a Bitch. Went, that's a freaking blinding cover. I love that. Interesting song titles, right? I'm going to get that. No idea what it was. Put it on. Absolutely fell in love with the album. And so suddenly I'm sitting there in the night, and then I didn't realize that you guys started back in 1974, 4 years before I was even born. Was when
and about 6 months before we could even play.
Because that's what I was wondering, because your first album, Rock Until You Drop, came out in 81. So you've got 7 years, and that's your kind of gestation period as a band where you're kind of growing in, you're finding your feet, you're working your sound out. So in those early years when you were playing the gigs, playing the circuit, etc., what sort of stuff were you doing? Was it stuff that eventually ended up on the first album, or was it a lot of like covers?
No, the only song that really came through to that was Inquisitor, which, funnily enough, we're going to be doing on the US tour. Just
okay.
Full circle thing. That was kind of the oldest song. When we were playing the clubs in from 76 through till 79, we'd be playing half originals and half covers. And some of those originals ended up on one of the bonus discs on the box set of Rock Until You Drop, which I finally found a demo from 77 or something, which is weird and interesting because it's 4-piece, and me, Mark, and Paul are taking turns singing. Paul Bowden was in the band when we started it.
Right.
And when we changed to a 3-piece was like a seismic shift, and that's when things really changed as far as attitude, arrangements, and songwriting. Once we got Rob Hunter in, we had 3 like-minded guys that just were full of energy, and a lot of things happened from that. Would be like the tail end of 79 going forward into the 80s from then. But back then we'd be playing, I mean, it's what inspired us. It was all the faster stuff of most of the bands we loved. So when all the club bands would be playing Smoke on the Water, we'd be playing Highway Star like five times faster, and Space Station Number 5 by Montrose, as opposed to Rock Candy, which so we wouldn't play the typical stuff. We'd listen to the local rock show and go, "Oh, that sounds cool. Who's this? It's some band called Blue Oyster Cult. Let's learn that and play that." So we play songs that we didn't know, never mind the audience. So we'd be playing MA262 and didn't have the lyrics, so we'd be phonetically making stuff up, It's all about that when I was heat up bay. I had a wood get it back. One word in 10 because the albums never had lyric sheets, so you just make it up. Ted Nugent, we do, Pony Express off one of the Amboy Duke things way back because that sounds cool, and it's in A. Let's play it in A flat, just to be awkward, the most impossible riffs in the wrong place. It's funny, but we built a following up because, unlike all the other local bands, the majority of which wanted to be the Eagles,
right?
We most certainly did not. So,
because you definitely weren't from a look point of view. So I didn't realize the early look of the band because I only, as I came into Life's a Bitch, and after that, the look of the band definitely changed at that point. But in the early part, they were called athletic, wearing sportswear. Now we see this in metal bands now; they all have costumes and masks and stuff. But you guys were wearing like shoulder pads of like sports gear and helmet. Where did all this concept come from?
Well, initially, you're just wearing whatever, and at that point, it was like you're going to wear leather and studs and all that. There was only one band doing it, and that was Judas Priest, And before that, they were all silks, and we didn't like the silks thing, and we just ended up because we were running around wearing these running tops that either were like white with a black stripe or white with a red, and you'd wear whatever tight trousers you could get, spandex or whatever. And it was just comfortable, and it just looked simple. Now, when we went to the States in '82, we were going past Madison Square Garden, and there was an ice hockey store. And Mark and Rob are just staring through the windows going, "Oh, I could wear those pads." And he's like, "I could wear that helmet." Because he was sticking the nut on the cymbals and cutting his head every night, which was getting old, So it just developed from that. He got a motocross, like an armor thing that he could wear, and really develop that character. And it got to the point of ridiculousness with the Packers back cover, which thank God it was never worn anywhere other than on that cover. But we did have pretty crazy costumes for the Stay Hard thing, and at the time it was just like, look different, look crazy. Why not?
Why not?
Look different, as opposed to, shuffling on in your t-shirt and jeans and looking at the ground. We were inspired by entertainers. I mean, the first band me and Mark ever saw were opening for Slade, who were master entertainers, but it was Alex Harvey.
Right.
And it was like a lesson in how to handle an audience, because the audience didn't know who Alex Harvey was and didn't care. But after about 10 minutes, boom, he had them by the short curlies and wouldn't let go. And it was just phenomenal, And people like that, that was your education. We'd go to the City Hall or Newcastle Mayfair and see the bands and, mentally take notes. Why are they going down well? Or why are they going down badly? Why does this appeal and why does this not? And it would all go in the bank and gain interest,
So I'm interested about the idea that you went out in like 1980 and you did the first single. Was it called "Don't Need Your Money"?
Yeah.
Now it's interesting to read notes that you went out on those series of shows that you started doing, and the bands that you went out with: Ozzy, Motorhead, Whitesnake, Iron Maiden. Which, if you said to a group of bands now and said you're like a big first single and you went out on a load of shows and you did it, that would feel to them like they've made it. That you've gone out with some of these big bands. But I guess back in 1980, these bands were probably not the bands that we would see today, especially Iron Maiden with Killers.
No, I mean, the Iron Maiden were playing the marquee, but in our particular ghetto of music, Iron Maiden were making a lot of noise. I mean, they were in sounds every week, and they were the Great White Hope and all that. Absolutely. So that was awesome. What happened to us is John Peel, the DJ. Yep. If you remember, his whole thing was playing new music, whether he liked it or not. He didn't care. It was just like, new band, give them a shot. So he put on Don't Need Your Money, and Aussies happening to be listening to the radio, and goes, who's this? I want them. Yeah. I want them. And the next thing you know, you got a call, you're opening for Ozzy Osbourne for 4 shows on the Blizzard of Oz tour. And that was like, whoa, amazing. And then the same thing happened. Whitesnake, Gary Moore was opening for them with G-Force. G-Force broke up very quickly, and it was just like, you guys want to fill in for G-Force for 2 gigs with Whitesnake at Sheffield and Bradford? It's like, yeah, absolutely. And that was, hi everyone, Gary Moore can't be here tonight. Here's Raven. Talk about being thrown to the wolves,
I mean, did that feel like that point where you were like, this is it, this is our springboard now, this is where things are going to start to take off?
I mean, we were just doing what we were doing. It was all just part of the process, You're too laser focused on what you're doing to stand back and go, wow, this is incredible, this is amazing. The only thing anything like that happened was when the first album came out, and we got like really amazing reviews, which we immediately said to each other, enjoy it. We've seen it happen so many times, this will not last. The next album we do, they're all going to hate us. So, we were grounded with that. But a phone call came in to Neat, and it was, you guys are in at number 10 on the chart. Now, that really meant something. That was like a big deal, and we all freaked out. And then there was a phone call 20 minutes later. Sorry, wrong. That's not the case. And that was like, all right, that's it then. We're not believing shit ever again. It's just like, whatever. So, in a sense, it's good that happened. It just like, all right, yeah, take it all with a pinch of salt and just, try to make the rewards make sense to yourself. It's just like, it was a big deal making an album. You had this piece of plastic that we did, and it wouldn't have existed if we hadn't have written the songs and arranged them and played them and all the rest of it, So that's obviously not such a thing now. It's the music business in that sense changed immeasurably. But back in the day, that was a big deal. That and, playing the big halls in our hometown, playing the City Hall, playing the Mayfair, that was a big deal, And then you move on and you set sights on, it would be nice to do this, it would be nice to do that. Or these things come across and you're like, oh, okay, great. So, the first time you go to Europe was a revelation.
Yeah.
We played a gig at a place called the Odyssea 2001 in Milan. And the dressing room was kind of cordoned off. You remember those dividers they had at school, like a concertina divider?
Oh, yeah.
Right, so that was the dressing room. So we finish, we get off. It gets torn down by the fans who like ants crawl all over us. And we say, what the hell is going on here? It's like, whoa. And, the Dutch, because, typically we knew the Newcastle audience was a great audience. And the further north you got, it went crazier. And the further south you went, it was just like, oh, I'm having a great time. And, I mean, luckily, due to the internet, that's kind of washed away a lot now. People kind of know how they should enjoy themselves, sure, rather than.
Well, it's this now, isn't it? It's phone in your hand.
Oh, that nonsense. But back then, I mean, when we played with Ozzy at the Hammersmith Odeon, you could have heard a pin drop. Nobody.
Really?
I jumped the audience pit and was swinging a bass guitar, trying to hit people in the front row, and they were just looking at me like, "Really?" And then the next time we did it with girls' school, it was great. It was wonderful. So,
I'm going to ask this one. I'm only going to ask once. It's the only time I'm actually going to cover this band. But I have to ask because it's well documented that Metallica's first big tour, 1983, was with you as their opener. Now we all know who this band Metallica, this little upstart band, who they are.
We've heard of them. Yeah.
We've heard of them. They've done something of note, I guess. But when you had these guys opening, did you think at the time they were like these have got something special, or was it just a case of this is just another band coming through the grinder at the moment?
Well, they were good, and they had that gang mentality that we have, So we were kindred spirits with that, absolutely. But if you turned around and said this was going to happen from that band,
the biggest metal band in the world, yeah,
not in a million years. I mean, not a chance. And that band wouldn't have happened. But when they did their next album, they changed hugely. It was a big shift in what they were doing, and that set a kind of template that they followed for like the next 2 or 3 records, and it definitely appealed to more people. They slowed stuff down. They put a bit more thought in their arrangements. They had actual songs as opposed to last one finished so puff,
Because it is really interesting.
Not to knock the first album, because it's got some great stuff on it, but it really was the prototypical thrash metal album, and they, to a large degree, moved away from that.
I found it really odd getting into Metallica at the Black Album was the first one I got into theirs, and then I was like straight away I was back in the CD exchange shop, and I was like, oh, Kill 'Em All, I'll listen to that next. And I was like, you sure this is the same band here?
Yeah,
this
exactly.
doesn't correlate. And then you had Justice for All, and I'm like, hang on, this
even just from Justice to that, it's
anyway, Master of Puppets. Right, Master of Puppets, I got you now. All right, I know where I am again. It's a very odd
it's interesting to do that with bands where it's maybe not as apparent as you live through it, but when you find a band and you get into that catalogue either later or in the middle of the catalogue and try and figure out what was going on, it's odd.
The odd changes.
But I mean, that's life. You're going through all these life experiences. You change as a person. You change as a musician. You've got all these different influences at you. You've got different challenges. So when people turn around and go, I wish they'd do an album like this, it's like, do you want to go and wear your short pants on and be 5-year-old again?
Yeah.
It's
I do hear that.
There's a string. You kind of got to stay true to what you are, and there'll always be a string leading that through. But to blindly copy what you've done before it's creative death. First off, there's no fun in that, and you might as well be writing pop songs like Max Miller for Madonna and whoever.
I mean, there are certain bands we've talked about it, myself and Andy and Kirk on the channel, about there are fans who absolutely want their band to sound the same on every album. They want 10 albums all sounding the same, whereas I guess I'm one of the people that I would like to have 10 very different albums, and so that if I'm into a thrash mood, I can listen to that. If I want a bit more of a rock out track, I can go to this album, or I want to hear different stories of the band, if you like.
It's nice to have a core direction or whatever, but dabble, stick your toes in different pools occasionally, and if that's done in the right way, it's interesting, it's cool. If it's done what happened to us and happened to a lot of bands in the mid-80s, where be commercial or die type of thing, that's not very conducive, and that comes down to the division between creativeness and craft. And craft is bricklaying, Creative is coming up with a spark and coming up with the interesting stuff. Bricklaying just like, I see somebody build a wall, I can do that.
Yeah.
And you can have all the craft. And it's like having a big rock show if you've got the money. You can have all the latest lights and the flash pots and the bombs, but if there's nothing going on with the 3, 4, 5, 6 guys on stage, whatever, then it's just nonsense. You've got to have substance.
Yeah.
and it's got to be done from the heart. It's got to have meaning. It's got to have emotion. You know?
Can I ask about in 1984 when you signed with Atlantic Records? At that time in period in the 80s, you've got obviously new wave of British heavy metals, big. Thrash is starting to really come through at that point, and glam hasn't really, or the glam metal bands like Motley Crue, Poison haven't quite got their hooks into the scene at this point. It hasn't quite turned. So was this a point where you were like, "That's it now. This is it. This is our big chance. We're going to go." All these other bands are kind of now getting signed up to record labels. We're getting a big push. Was Atlantic Records? This was your.
That's what we'd want. I mean, we basically burned all our bridges, moved to the States, and just said we're going to tour in '84 until we get a major agency for gigs and a major record deal. And we got the best agent, and we got, to our minds, one of the best labels. And both of them were terrible decisions because the best agent, we were with Premier Talent. They were the cream of the crop. And the cream of the crop weren't heavy metal bands that we could tour with the exception of Judas Priest. We weren't going to get an opening slot playing with The Who, and we weren't going to get an opening slot playing with Journey, for example, you know, where the other, I think ICM was the agent who had all the metal bands, and they were all pissed off at us because we should have signed with them, so they wouldn't let us open for any of their bands. So we did a number of dates with Priest and headline stuff, and eventually had to go cap in hand and say, hey, we got to leave. We got to go with these guys for our career. It's not going to work out.
Yeah.
And then as far as the record company is concerned, Atlantic is the most egregious offender at trying to destroy rock bands, pretty much.
Right.
Which sounds ridiculous. Oh, you know, AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, you got all this. But it was totally Spinal Tap. Like the meeting at the beginning of Spinal Tap where they're ready to start the tour with the record company people. It was exactly like that. And unfortunately, the movie hadn't come out yet, so we didn't get to check that out until a little later. You know? So when it got to the point where, you know, be more commercial, do this, be outrageous. We want, you know, basically they wanted Kiss meets Bon Jovi or some nonsense, you know. And we just felt like we were stood there with red noses and a dog collar on going, hang on a minute, we've been led up the garden path. And what happened was we did the packers back. They wouldn't give us any money to do a video. And we had all these grandiose plans. We went to visit NFL films. They had all this, you know, they put the camera on the guitar, which you may have seen in an old Gary Moore thing, because they did the Gary Moore video, and it was stuff like that. And that all fell apart. We had a soul-searching meeting and just said, no, let's do an EP, get back to basics, do what we do best. And we got the tour with Twisted Sister. And we were literally going out to get the bus, and they cancelled their tour because they were having exactly the same issues. Because they did come out and play, which was about as far removed from Can't Stop Rock and Roll as you could imagine.
Yeah.
You know? So we went out and did our own headline tour, and then we changed agents, went out in '87 with Life's a Bitch. The record company released the album right as the tour ended. Brilliant. And I think pretty much at that point, you know, Rob quit the band pretty much not long after that tour. And we had me and Mark were stuck in the States with about 2 pennies to rub together. So that would be the part and behind the music where it starts.
Yes. This was, now that I understood well with the situation with Atlantic, was Life's a Bitch written with that in mind? What was going on?
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge fuck you to the
when you start reading through it, like,
thing.
Pick your window, you're leaving right now. I'm like, that could be you saying that to Atlantic Records reps. Get out! I'm fucking throwing you out.
And that was more local hoodlums and gangsters, but there's definitely a lot of that in there, you know. And also on the Mad EP, there's a couple of songs that give me just a little of what I've got coming, you know, because we felt like we'd done our bit, but it wasn't being reciprocated. So we ended up going through labels like toilet paper following that, because the scene completely changed by 87. It was, you were either full on glam or full on thrash.
Yeah.
And truth be told, we were neither.
And
We
by
were
that
hard,
point,
we were heavy, we were fast, we had thrash elements,
yeah.
but we also had songs and melody and blah, blah, blah. So, and we were entertaining as opposed to just, the whole thing. So, and then that in itself got washed away by grunge and what have you. So we just rolled our sleeves up and just worked, just kept doing stuff.
Because this was, you actually touched there on grunge, because that was my next sort of question, was because when grunge came out, that pretty much everyone said that's the death of metal. That's pretty much all forms of classic metal. I mean, Metallica managed to ride that out with their Black album, but pretty much everyone else was kind of like getting pushed out. You weren't getting any kind of publications. They didn't care. It was all about simple chords and being basically as slobbish as you can in a lot of cases in some of the grunge bands I heard. Now, I am actually a big fan of grunge. In fact, Soundgarden. I love Soundgarden.
Nirvana. I loved Soundgarden. Yeah, I saw them. Yeah, they could be sloppy, but there was undeniable talent in those two bands, in Pearl Jam, in Alice in Chains. Those four, they were great. They were
Great songwriting.
And it was a label that was thrown on them, just like athletic rock.
Athletic rock, yes.
That's all it was just a label thrown on them. And in a sense, it was a microcosm of the new wave of British heavy metal. It was a period of time. There was a bunch of bands in the Northwest especially that no one cared about. They just got on, did their own thing. And then somebody went, oh, we've got a movement here. Let's get our checkbooks out and boom, boom, boom.
Because grunge was one of the shortest movements that did actually happen in the 90s, because new metal came out in 94 and with Korn in 93 in their first album. But when grunge first came out, was there the fact there was really a real hard time for the classic metal bands to kind of get any sort of focus? Record labels weren't really interested in those sort of bands. At that challenge, was there a challenge for the band like Raven to kind of go, do you know what, this is not working anymore, this is not worth it anymore? Was there any chance that you guys were going to go?
Nah, not at that point. We were absolutely 100% committed. I mean, the toughest time we had is when Rob left the band, and like I say, we were stuck in the States with nothing, and we had a manager guy turn around saying, "Oh, maybe you need to get like get a sexy girl in playing the violin or some shit like that." I say, "Are you out of your mind? What we've got this legacy, we've done this, we've done that. We're absolutely not doing that. We're going to get a new drummer and move forward." And we got Joe Hasselvander in, great musician, great drummer, great writer, and pushed on from there. And it got tougher because the new metal thing came in, and it came into Europe. We'd been concentrating on Europe. We did a couple of albums in the Architect of Fear and the Heads Up EP in Europe, and it started making things tough there. So we ended up doing stuff in Japan. We were just making hay where the sun was shining, and eventually, let me turn this dinger off. Eventually, things started to turn round, which is rather crazy because initially it was a band who we brought out as the opener on the tour. It was us, Hammerfall, and Tank. And Hammerfall were the new darlings. And it was explained to me by a German journalist that, well, they're playing German heavy metal, but they're Swedish. And that's why we're allowed to like them. It's just like, I've never heard such rubbish in army life. Who cares if they're from freaking outer Mongolia? If they're good, they're good.
They're good, yeah.
They were good, and it helped stir up some stuff, and metal started its slow climb back, from then on. But then we, eventually ran into other issues, like my brother nearly dying in 2001. So that wasn't fun.
No. Can I ask about my observation of the 90s for especially like mid 90s onwards? The British metal bands like Raven, etc., British audiences just seem to completely fall out of love with them, but European markets seem to completely embrace them.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea why that was? Why was the British market suddenly became so hostile to the fact they just didn't
I
care about it?
don't know. I mean, traditionally, the media has always been incredibly fickle, more fickle than anywhere else on the planet. So it just seemed like that washed into the audience a little bit. They just went, "Oh, well, what are they telling us to listen to now?"
Hmm.
And for all that punk was pushed down our throats, there was a huge audience of people still went to see AC/DC and Pat Travers and Judas Priest and UFO and Zeppelin. Even at that point was still,
Hmm.
I mean, it was all very much alive. So, but when it got to the new metal thing, it was just like, and you thought you hated grunge. What is this? This is awful. God, this is awful. And it just continued. You'd see these bands coming out being and again, especially in the British press, oh, here's our latest darlings. And it's just like, please, you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig.
Hmm.
And we just did our own thing until, like, because we're dinosaurs. We've been around for so long. We knew the wheel would turn back at some point,
Yeah, and
which it
that's
did.
we did. Well, that's what I was going to say. Back in around about 2010, there was such a big resurgence of, I guess, what we would call legacy bands, in the sense that bands that have got a huge legacy, they've been going around for 20 years, but we hadn't really seen on the scene for a good 15 odd years.
Yeah.
Well, not in the UK, and suddenly there's this passion for new wave of British heavy metal bands, and of course classic thrash bands. So, could you put any reasoning behind why suddenly in 2010 onwards, suddenly the British market was like, we want these classic bands back?
Uh, well, at a certain point, I'm not sure if it was right then, but what would happen with a lot of the bands is they'd be overreached, or they'd have these horrible deals where they'd be personally responsible for advances paid to them. And it
Hmm.
was just like, we're not giving you a new advance for the next album. So the band would break up.
Yeah.
Or things like hunger and rent would become more important than getting out and being a rock star, so people would get real jobs. Now, as they worked through, give it 20, 25 years, and then, oh, the kids have grown up and left. Oh, I'm retired. Oh, I can do what I want now.
Hmm.
So a lot of these, let's get the band back together and the Blues Brothers, and
Yeah.
that's fine, you know, that's fine. We were just too stubborn and just didn't go through that. And the only years we had off was from 2001 till pretty much 2005 when we started doing festivals, when Mark was well enough to start doing festivals. And we did Bloodstock in 2005, and we did Keep It True in
Yeah.
Money, and we did Bang Your Head the next year. And as it went to 2010, we had an album out by then, and did an awful lot of European festivals, and things were back on the move again, definitely.
Because I mean, I only got a chance to listen to Metal City for the first time a couple of days ago. So I was like, oh, I've got to get a bit up to date. Metal City, an amazing album. Absolutely love that. I haven't had a chance to listen to All Hell's Breaking Loose yet. I'm going to do that. That's on
Well,
tomorrow's.
that'll kick you even further out the door. Okay.
And the reason I bring up these two albums is because my next question, which is, I do have a couple of I have a couple of questions I always have for bands that have been around for a little bit longer than the ones that have been around for 5 minutes. And it is, after all this time, do you still have a passion to write? Which is obviously you do, because you've had two albums out in the last few years. But
I have hundreds of riff ideas in
you're
here.
still going.
I add two or three at least every day. I just pick up a guitar or bass and say, "Oh, let's record that. Let's record." And it all, not all of it, but a lot of it ends up getting glued together and turned inside out and turns into songs. That's one of the biggest thrills, is writing a song. And
It's also the
writing
ability.
the riff and playing the guys. What do you think of this? And if it excites them as much as it excites me, then we're off and running. So we did. We really started this process with Extermination, which was back in like 2015, 16. I think 16 is when it came out. where we'd write a lot of songs and really be hard on ourselves with the arrangements and just the basic. Do you like this? Could it be better? Is anything in it at all that bugs you? Because not to say anything previously was bad, but we just said, in order to make it better, you got to work harder. There's just no way around it. So we wrote, rewrote, and went over it, and we did this album Extermination, and it was a lot better than the album we did before. So that was a step forward. We did the same thing again with different circumstances because, Joe had to leave the band due to health reasons, and we got this crazy genius Mike Heller in on drums, putting his input, and Metal City was a huge step forward because of that, and in a lot of the ways we did things. But we wrote 30 songs, and then a few of them were passed on to All Hell's Breaking Loose, but we really wrote a lot of songs for that too. So there was like 35 songs. And we ended up recording 18.
Right.
Pretty much. And a couple of them are coming out on, there's a cover tune, which is funny. And there's another cover tune, which is even funnier. So we're having fun with them. These are for specific projects that our label Silver Linings doing later in the year. So that should be fun. But hopefully the other stuff will make it see the light of day. Because they were great songs. It was just a question of, okay, we got all these songs. What would be a great starter? What would follow that? What would be your end song? And you try to pre-sequence. And it was like, well, this song's great, but it doesn't fit. Doesn't fit in that. Or it's similar to this other one that's in there. So take it out of that batch. And we've got this 10 songs, 35, 40 minutes that absolutely kills you. And that's what we wanted for All Hells. And it worked out great,
Because I was really absolutely surprised. But obviously, I haven't had a chance to do All Hells, but with Metal City, when I listened to it, if I didn't know it was you, I would have just thought it was a young band in the sense of just the frenetic pace of the album. Because you just sit down, I'm sitting there go, my question before I actually had a chance to listen to that one was going to be, do you still have the passion, but do you also have the ability to maintain the pace of the playing of Raven?
Yeah.
Which obviously you do, but do you struggle anything from a physical point of view? Because it is demanding playing in a band. I play in a band, and I know after I finish a gig, I'm sitting there. I've got, as a drummer, I've got ice packs on my knees, my shoulders are killing, my knuckles are swollen from early stage arthritis, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh, great, that's all I need."
Yeah, touch wood. I mean, Mark's got his issues from the accident where his ankle and his knees are like going to require operations before long. But you would never know it watching him on stage, the way he's running around and stuff. It's crazy. So physically, no, we're in, we're old, but we're not farts. So we've got more energy than most bands to start with. And we've got at this point, I've been playing for nearly 50 years.
Yeah.
And, you feel like well, why are you still playing? I'm beginning to get better at it.
I finally learned how to play that song.
That's an old classical music joke from somebody, a violinist or something. But no, I mean, we feel we're just getting started. We really planted the flag back in 2010 or whatever it was with Walk Through Fire, and just said, here's where we are. We got to get better, every single one. Play harder, play more, play everywhere, do all the things. I mean, when Mike joined, he joined probably in June of 2017. We did 150 gigs that year from June to December.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of work ethic we've got. And we're going out on tour on the 22nd here in the States. And there's like 3 days off in the travel days. We just hate days off. We want to work. We want to do it. And, as long as nobody gets sick, we can go forever. We're good.
Because one of the things I was thinking about was there's been a lot of social media. We get the chance to see someone's always filming a gig. And there are a lot of bands that have been around for many years who we now get to see them when they play live, and you go, "Oh, that's not good. Your voice is gone. Your performance is shot." If you as a band couldn't perform at the level that the fans expected, would you sort of go, "Look, we need to stop now. We're not going to just keep egging it out for the sake of it.
Yeah, that would
We've
be
got to give the right
embarrassing.
response."
That would be embarrassing. I mean, we've all seen some of the big stars lately over the last 5 or 6 years, like crash and burn terribly, and it's just like, no, I'd be embarrassed. I feel I'm singing better than ever. I've got all the range I ever had. I can hit all the notes. As long as I look after myself, I'm fine, you know. Touch wood, as they
Touch
say.
wood. So I've got two final questions. So obviously you've been actually lucky enough to be part of the music industry from where it was just purely gigs and radio play through to music television, through to online press, to record CDs coming out, to vinyl disappearing, to vinyl coming back, to Spotify and streaming services taking over, and kids nowadays, 18-year-olds, having no idea what a CD actually is. So what's your experience and how have you managed to work through? Because nowadays, as a musician, you've got to do TikToks and you've got to do an Instagram post and you've got to post on your social medias to make sure people know what's going on. How do you manage that, and how have you had to adapt yourself, obviously, as the industry changes?
Well, like you say, it's been a gradual process. I mean, it wasn't a big deal in 2009, 2010, and then it started to creep in, and then it was just like, oh well, we need a page for the band, and we need to do this, and we need a web page, and you just follow along with it. It's adapt or die, you really have to. But the biggest change, of course, is you used to go and play concerts as a promotional item to sell your album. And now you're selling your album. It's a promotional item to help you sell T-shirts.
Yes, you've basically become a clothing brand, is what you're saying.
That's and luckily we've always done well with merch. We've always had decent merch, and we've got great stuff coming out for the tour here. We've just been working on all that. It's fun. It's exciting. It's a good part of who we are. And there's certain bands. I mean, you could pull Iron Maiden for a start. I mean, where would they be without the merchandising? I mean, it's a huge part of what they are and what they do. So it's not something to ridicule or to slink away from. It's a huge money maker. Let's be honest. It makes the difference. I mean, we've had gigs in the past where you've played the Three Men and a Dog and made $1,000 in merch. I mean, that's life or death, It's crazy. That can make an enormous difference. And of course, this thing I've heard about here with some of the bigger venues taking huge cuts, and by the time they take 40% and charge VAT, it's like, really?
Yeah. I've seen that.
That's just criminal. That's almost as criminal as Spotify. But
yes, don't get started on that. I can't stand streaming.
The absolute worst. I mean, I have to have Spotify because of the labels involved with and all that, but I never use it. And if someone uses it as a tool to go, oh, let me check something new, and then go and buy it, that's great. We're lucky in that the heavy metal community likes a physical product. They want the artwork. So we spend a lot of time doing a great booklet, a great, package for the art with our stuff. And that gives you something you can't get from a download. The download doesn't tell you who played what, who was the producer, who was the engineer, where was it done, who was it done with, was there any guests, who's on the thank you list, is it people you know, people you've heard of?
Yeah.
And those are the things that got us as kids. In 1973, I would read sounds from cover to cover and be familiar with the producers and the people in the bands and what the albums were before I'd even heard them. Before I even got a chance, because was we getting 50 pence a week pocket money or some crap at that point, So those things, it's ingrained in you. When you got the album, you'd stare at the artwork while you were listening to it, and it was an immersive thing.
Yeah.
And to a degree, that's still a part of the heavy metal people. That's what we want to hear, you know.
I like it where an album's actually you can see the transition of songs from track 1 to track 8, and you follow that journey through in the booklet.
Yeah,
With Spotify, it seems to shuffle it, or it puts an advert in, and you're like, it's just ruined. It's a singles.
Yeah, it's a singles mentality, which is, you know, it's a totally different thing. And you know, we grew up on singles, but usually the band would have a single and it wasn't on the album, which is why we never did it initially. I mean, until the third album, the single was on the album, but the other ones, no, we didn't do it. It was a totally separate thing, and it was a taster for the band and a taster for the album without giving it away, you know.
Yeah. So, final question: you have mentioned it a few times about obviously the touring, but I guess what's the plan going forward? You've mentioned obviously there's a tour. Your last album came out in 2023, so I know you just mentioned you've got a load of ideas. So, were you thinking of working on the next album? And when, if you were working on that, would that be next year? Or
I'm writing, Mark's writing, Mike's writing, but Mike's moving, and you know, we did the whole album in his studio in LA, and so we want to do the next one in the same kind of situation. He's moving, so he's getting a new room built. So once that's all done, so that's going to take a while, which is fine. We've got time to write more, and you know, literally the album's been out 8-9 months at this point, so we still got that going on. As far as live work, we've got this US tour, and then we come back over to Europe. We're doing a bunch of festivals. We're doing Wacken. We're doing Alcatraz in Belgium. We're doing a couple of the smaller ones in Denmark and Sweden, and another German one, I think it is. There's maybe 6 altogether. And in between that, we'll be playing dates. We'll be doing that. And then later on in the year, we're looking at Australia, Singapore, Bangkok, and also a South American run.
wow,
we've got a festival in Mexico, and we're trying to stretch that out into something too. So that'll wrap it up nicely.
That'll keep you busy for the rest of the year.
Oh, hell yeah.
Well, all it leaves me to say is a big thank you for obviously joining me today. It's been great to actually talk to you a little bit. There's a lot more history I'm sure I could have covered, but we would have been here all evening talking about it. But we've kept it to just under an hour, so just a big thank you for spending the last just under an hour with me.
No problem. I appreciate it, Dave. And, you know, we can do it again next time I'm around.
Part 2.
All right, mate.